Okay, so I'll start this interview now. So, hi guys.
Hi,
hello. Would you like to introduce yourself to people who would watch the documentary when this gets included? Yeah.
Well, my name is Gino Hart, and I'm the designer of the Tintanic, the largest Titanic model in South Africa.
Okay, I'll introduce Mhae. I'm Riley, and I am a Titanic enthusiast, and I like the Titanic and the ship. We are having this interview so we can include it in a documentary me and my friend are working on. Okay, so we'll start with the first question. Tell me and the people watching a bit about you and how you became a Titanic enthusiast. And yeah.
Well, I was 14 years old when I first heard the name Titanic, and it was with the James Cameron epic movie of 1997. I heard the name Titanic, and it was as if my entire life had come to a standstill. And it was as if I had a flashback from a past life, as if I'd been there, if I'd known these people, and if that was the place where I belonged. So then I started to do research about the Titanic, and I ended up building cardboard box Titanic models and sinking them in the Vaal Dam in the Free State here in South Africa. A lot of times I would build the models and they would be sunk in fish ponds or in swimming pools in somebody's backyard. And a lot of times the models would end up being broken up because they were prototypes. They were built to be destroyed. So I've always had a fascination for the way the Titanic sank and what was happening on the decks of the ship as the ship went down. And of course, the effect that that had on so many people after the disaster had taken place for many, many, many decades to come. So I suppose it's never left. Eventually, I gave it up and started working, and I had to enter adulthood, and I worked in advertising, as did my mentor. And the person I looked up to for Titanic was Walter Lord, the author of A Night to Remember and The Night Lives On, because that's really where the story began for me. I was in the coastal town of Durban. This was right at the beginning, and I had found his book, A Night to Remember.
You froze. Oh, it kept me off for some reason.
So I had a fascination because of the A Night to Remember book, moreover so than the movie. It was the historical aspects of the disaster that really got me interested, and what happened on the ship itself and the historical aspects of the entire event is what drew me. So eventually, working in advertising, just like Walter Lord did, I ended up thinking that it would be a good idea to build a very good Titanic model out of tin and get sponsorships for it, because I'd had all these photographs of prototypes that I built in the past. And I went to a lot of companies in South Africa, and I pitched the idea to them, and I said, I think I can do this. I know I can do it. I'm going to build you a dining room, just not now. But give me the material and I'll build it, and I'll make you famous. And that's basically what happened. So the moment that I had my first sponsor on board for the Titanic project, the rest just followed in easy succession. It snowballed, basically.
Okay, thank you for sharing. What got me into Titanic was that my mum showed me the film made by James Cameron, and I've had an inspiration of Titanic since then, and I've done research. I've watched A Night to Remember. I've learned new ships and stuff like that. Watched films about the ships like the Britannic made in the 2000s, the Lusitania, Terror at Sea, and stuff like that.
Yeah, the A Night to Remember movie was also, for me, a more accurate retelling of the Titanic disaster, and I also enjoyed it a lot more because it was in black and white. Being in South Africa, that was an international film. So when I bought it, I had to buy it through a company that would import it for me, because I didn't know anything about importing anything into the country. And it was a very expensive film for me. I think it was about 500 Rand, 500 South African ZAR, which is quite a lot of money. Even for then, this was about 20 years ago. And when the film eventually came, it took 8 months for the film to reach me in South Africa. And then I was all excited, came home, wanted to pop the disc into the DVD player, only to find that my DVD player did not read that particular disc region code. So I was unable to watch Night to Remember until I'd gone out and bought a cheap DVD player. So, but I was ecstatic when I saw it the first time, because it felt like you were watching real history unfold on the screen. It was as if they were there. So James Cameron's film is fantastic, of course. I love it to bits and pieces. Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet really sold those fictional characters of Jack and Rose. And just like Ken Marshall, you know, whenever you're watching the film, as a Titanic enthusiast, they're not really bothered about what's going on with Jack and Rose. You're more about the sets and the accuracy and how they did things in the background. to make it as accurate as possible. And because of all those notes and those points that they hit and they got it right in so many ways, one easily overlooks any inaccuracies in the film. So that's my point of view on that. Love the films.
Okay, I think we're going to move on to our next question now. Well, I don't think we are. Okay, so what year was the Tintanic created in?
So she's the end result of a long line of prototypes. So I started in 1998 building my first Titanic model prototype. It was about 1 meter long. It looked nothing like the Titanic. It's built out of a cardboard box, and I sank it in our fish pond in the backyard. And Tintanic is my 19th Titanic model. And I started building the construction of the Titanic. I started with that in the year of 2014. It had taken me 3 years to build the Titanic because of the 4,000 interiors on the 9 different deck levels on the inside of the model. So, but because I'd followed my dream and I'd gotten all these sponsors and I'd gone out and I'd actually decided to build the Titanic, I got the job at the Titanic Artifact exhibition as the local historian for that exhibit. And I ended up taking 25,000 people on hourly tours around 144 real artifacts from the wreck of the real Titanic for 8 months in 2 different cities. And then I had to come back home, build the Titanic, complete it. And the entire process of the construction of Titanic took about 3 years.
Wow, that took a long time then. And the original?
Yeah, it was exhausting. It was really exhausting work. But as you can see, it paid off really, really well.
I'm going to ask the next question. So, what was it like when the model was finally complete and released?
Well, it was very scary because I built this model not thinking that I would tour. I thought that I just wanted a big boat. That was the whole plan. I just wanted a large Titanic model for my own personal collection. I had no idea that I was going to tour the entire country with it and turn it into a business. So when the model was finished, we set up shop in my old carpentry classroom in Villiers, which is a very, very small town in the Free State in the heart of South Africa. It's known for farming communities, dust roads, and nothing much going on. So we thought, we would build the Titanic in that classroom and people would come and see her. And we would be bringing the people to the town and influencing the tourism trade in that little town. Unfortunately, that didn't work out the way we planned because people are not interested in traveling such a far distance to such a remote location to come and see it. So we did have a launch for the Titanic in June of 2017. And present at the exhibition at the launch exhibition for Titanic was Mr. Redmond Taggart, who is the great nephew of Thomas Andrews, the designer of the real Titanic. So he was sitting at the same table as my old carpentry teacher, my English teacher, the principal of the school, and so on. And it was a very small, intimate launch party, as it were. You could imagine it being just like the launch party that Peary took over, to see the new Olympic sitting in Southampton the day that the Titanic was launched. It was a very select group of Titanic enthusiasts. And it was a dress-up event. And most people made an effort to dress up. And that was quite nice to see. I was the only one who was wearing tattered jeans because I'm the artist. And at that moment still, I didn't know that I was going to tour. I really thought that people would still come out and see the Titanic in this remote little hometown that I was living in. And it's kind of dawned on us that that plan wasn't going to work. So we had to come up with a different strategy. So I sat for a couple of months thinking, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? And eventually I realized that the Titanic would become an activator, a mall attraction, and we could actually get her into shopping centers and attract a lot of business and a lot of feet. And even when we opened in our first shopping center, we didn't know that we would be successful. My assistant just came up to me and said to me, Gino, there were like 1 million people taking photographs of Titanic today. And I said to him, that's the key. If we had one rand for every photograph that was taken, we would have made $1 million for the day. So there was a scheme going that it was going to work. And we just had to follow that dream and follow through with that plan. And we started contacting a lot of different shopping centers. And I mean, it was a lot of work. For every 100 shopping centers you contacted, maybe one shopping center came back to you and said, yeah, it's a great idea, we'll do it. So yeah, a lot of groundwork was laid for the Titanic. And then we traveled throughout the entire country. We did 5 different provinces. We were seen by 8 million people throughout the country over a period of 3 years. So it was another 3 years of touring and being on the road constantly and living in hotels and in bachelor flats and in cottages. And every month you would be in a different city or in a different place with different people. So you can imagine it was very disorienting as an artist because you're moving around so much. So you're never in one place long enough to actually make friends. Those friends that you make are temporary. And you have to worry constantly, where is the money coming from for the next show? How are we moving from city to city? Is the transport organized? Is your accommodation organized in the next town? Do you have petrol money? And do you have enough snacks for the road?
How much did the Titanic weigh? As you said, you had to transport it to places. So getting it on and off whatever transport you used, it must have been like heavy.
Yeah, well, luckily I designed the Titanic in 6 individual sections that could interconnect. And all the deck pieces on the inside of the ship can lift out of it, as if you're, taking down the layers and peeling the layers away. So it's a lot of work building the ship and rebuilding it and then breaking it down and then transporting it from one place to the next. The fact of the matter is, she's so big that we have to use trucks to move the Titanic. And you can't use too big a truck because then the work becomes a lot more. And you can't use a truck that's too small because then you're going to have to do double trips. So we traveled at first with 4-ton trucks from venue to venue because our first province that we were showing in, all the destinations, all the venues were actually quite close to each other. We're talking about 30, 40 kilometers apart. And that was fine. We could use one trucking service for that. But then once the coastal tour began, we had to travel a distance of 1,000 kilometers between one venue and the next. And that's where the tricky part came in. So we tried to cut expenses as much as we possibly could by using, different transport companies all the time, between venues, because there's no point in using somebody from Johannesburg if you're sitting in East London. So you have to use somebody from East London to take you to the next place. The breakup and breakdown of the Titanic actually takes about 10 hours with a crew of 4 people. So, and that's working really, really fast. The other trick that we had to accommodate was that the Titanic, when she's brought into a shopping center, she cannot be built during daylight hours. So you for the trucking service, because you have to hire these crews after hours, and they have to unload the boat at 8 o'clock at night. We have to build it on site before 8 o'clock the next morning, and then we have to still get in some sleep. So normally when I'm building the Titanic in a shopping center overnight, if we start at 8 o'clock in the evening, I'm normally done by about 2, 3 a.m. in the morning. And then I can quickly go home for about an hour, hour and a half sleep. And then I have to wake up, get dressed, get showered, go to the boat, stand there in pointy shoes and look pretty and say, I'm Gino Hart. It took 3 years. So you have to meet the press and you have to entertain the visitors. And it's a very, very big process. Eventually, we decided that moving between cities such long distances, it wasn't feasible for us to hire trucks anymore. So we bought a bakkie or a truck of our own, and we attached a long flatbed trailer to it. And every time we would move, we would just hire a flatbed long distance trailer that went one way. So that worked out a lot cheaper for us as well. So by the end of the tour in 2017, in 2021, so we'd been traveling for 3 years solid. By the end of the tour, when we reached Cape Town, our final destination, we had traveled a further distance than the real Titanic did without a drop of water.
Okay, thank you for sharing that with us. I have got another question.
You're welcome.
Can you provide a detailed description about the model to people who don't know about it?
Yeah, sure. So the Tintanic is not a spelling mistake. The additional N in the name is there for a reason. It describes the material that the model is built out of, which is mainly tin. She was built with 38 sheets of high-grade aluminium. She's held together with 55,000 real rivets, and she has more than 4,000 rooms on the inside. The model is 27 feet in length, which places her in the top 5 largest Titanic models in the world. The Tintanic is the only Titanic model, however, that travels from city to city on a countrywide tour as the Titanic did. No other Titanic model did that as an exhibition, as a display that went around from city to city free of charge for people to see. So yeah, it's a big model and it's lovely to see. She is an artistic piece that weighs about 500 kilograms at this stage, because all those interior fittings, the furniture, the wall panels, the lighting system on the inside of the ship, that all has to be added as well. So by the time we are finished with the Titanic, and when I say we, I mean me, the Titanic will probably weigh around 1 ton. And then we might change the name to Tintanic. So I don't think we will, but it's an interesting concept.
Okay, I've also got another question. How much did it cost for you to build your model? So, like, did it cost any money for you to build it?
It did, and also it didn't. So when I set out to build the Titanic, I went looking for sponsors. And of course, I said to my sponsors, look, I don't have the money. I can't build, the boat and pay for it myself. So therefore, I want you to sponsor the model, because you will be getting marketing out of it. It's something I called lifetime marketing. And that's something that companies were interested in, because it meant that, I would be going out and doing marketing and publicity for them, on their behalf. They would be appearing in so many newspapers and magazines, and they would be appearing on every advert that the Titanic ever put out. So long-term projection, the marketing and the association was very, very important for companies. So they agreed to sponsor me all the material. But you have to understand, when I built the Titanic, I had made a decision not to work. So I did not have an income. So for 3 years, it was very, very hard going. I didn't have an income for 3 years. And if you take collectively the income that I had lost, that I would have made, and the expenses of all the materials that the Titanic is built out of, you're probably looking at about 500,000 rand, which is about 500,000 ZAR in South African rand.
Wow, that's
But no, it didn't cost me personally anything, except for living expenses and so on. The Titanic artifact exhibition, when it visited South Africa in 2015 and 2016, was also a great form of income for me. While I wasn't building the model, I was touring with the artifact exhibition, and I made quite a lot of money there, which also sustained the project again in the latter half of the construction period. So I did have money to carry myself, and we did create the Tintanic Club, which had a few Titanic enthusiasts in it at the time, and their funding was helping me to stay afloat throughout those 3 years.
Okay. Is there any advice you would like to give to people who may start thinking about building a model?
Yeah, don't. It's really a lot of work. It's very exhausting, and you have to have a plan A, B, C, D, E, F, and so forth. It cannot rely on one source of income. And if you are planning on building a Titanic model, it's fine if you want to build one for your shelf, for your bookshelf, or for your display cabinet, and it's a small model that comes in a plastic model kit form. Something like the Trumpeter Titanic model is absolutely brilliant to have. It's a beautiful piece. I have one myself. It's just, you know, it's the thing about having fun with it. If you're not having fun with it, there's no point. I took my lead from James Cameron when he said, if you're not breaking new ground, then what's the point? So Titanic was breaking new ground by being a model that would travel and interest people. Since we don't have a Titanic model in South Africa, you know, we barely have a Titanic following in this country. But for us as collectively, you know, it's about exhibiting at different shopping centers and locations. And, you know, thousands of people come up to you and they say, oh, it's such a lovely model. Oh, it's such a pretty ship. And then there's that one kid that comes walking up to the Titanic model, and you see it in their eyes. They are true Titanic students. They are the ones who shush their dad and said, I want to read. Or they look at the model in amaze, or that 10-year-old boy or that 11-year-old girl who is infatuated with the Titanic, and their family and friends don't understand why more than 100 years ago. So that's why we did this. My advice to anybody, because it's very expensive and it's a lot of hard work. It's amazing to see it, but you have to have a real passion for what you're doing. If you're not going to finish it, don't start.
Okay, my network's being a bit unstable at the moment, so we'll see how it goes from here now.
No problem.
Have you got any...
My lighting has been bad.
Have you got any like Titanic stuff you would like to show us?
Some of the favorite things that I have in my Titanic collection come from the old Titanic Society of South Africa. So I can briefly show you a few things. This over here is the old records from the Titanic Society of South Africa. It's not only this one, it's this one. And it's this one. And it's this one over here. So these are filled with newspaper clippings and stories about the Titanic, and anywhere where the Titanic appeared in the media in South Africa throughout the last 40 years has been painstakingly collected by the Titanic Society of South Africa into these 3 beautiful binders. At one stage, there was a break-in at my house while I was on tour in Cape Town with the Artifact exhibition. And I called home and I said to my grandmother, I don't care about anything else. Are my binders there? So they're very, very valuable because they are irreplaceable for me. Also, among the other things that I like to collect are old newspapers, even if they're reprints of the Titanic disaster. So that's quite interesting. I like the New York Tribune, the Daily Mirror, the London Illustrated News, and also the Daily Telegraph, because they had so many beautiful stories, other than just the Titanic in them, that really bring to life what it was like to live in 1912. Baseball scores, people who were divorcing, the first CQD signals, anything that was interesting about life in 1912. So those are the things that I absolutely love.
Okay, thank you for sharing your memorabilia, your collectibles with us. I'll tell you what I've got if you want. Yeah. Okay, I'll have to put my camera on. There we go. So I'm going to start.
Your lighting is a lot better than mine.
I'm going to start off with showing what I got today. Just unwrapping it. So I got a piece of the RMS Titanic coal. Apparently it was...
Oh, that's really cool.
It was collected in 1994 on a expedition. They went down to the wreck.
We also have a piece of coal at the Tintanic exhibition, and it is also such a small fragment that people will really miss it if they don't look carefully. So it's a lovely piece, just to think that that piece of coal went down with the Titanic. It bore witness to the event itself. So it's really, really great to have that as a secondary artifact.
The next thing I would like to show you is this. It's a commemorative medal. It's got the Titanic on it.
That's lovely.
I got this from Simon Medhurst. He is the great-grandson of Robert Hitchens, the quartermaster of the Titanic.
Oh, yes. And of course, he had a South African connection as well.
I had a recent interview with him for the documentary as well.
Oh, good.
Another thing I would like to show you is this. It's like a little, like the form they would sign in if they would want to board the Titanic.
Yes, I've actually used that particular one, that particular ticket as you book for the Titanic. It's actually been described in full detail in my book, Titanic Practically Unthinkable. It's amazing what the third-class passengers had to go through as opposed to first-class passengers, and what their ticket actually included. So the meals and everything was included for them, but they had so many rules and regulations that they had to abide by. So the fine print on that ticket is really fine.
I also got this Titanic badge.
Oh, that's super cool.
I got that from Simon Medhurst as well.
Oh, you're so lucky.
You can find him on his Facebook group, Titanic Memorabilia, and
yes,
his Instagram is also called Titanic_Memorabilia. I've also got this. So we've got like a Titanic postcard thing, as well with a badge and a keyring.
Okay. Yeah, key rings have always sold very well at Titanic as well. But I noticed they don't want to buy key rings with my face on. They just want photos of the boat. So, yeah, that's lovely.
I got this. I've kept the ribbon on it. I've got this from America, the Titanic Museum in America, the world's largest museum attraction.
Yeah, I emailed them today, actually, for Titanic Virtually Unsinkable. It's lovely that you get to be in places that are so close to these places, because in South Africa, we don't have that at all. We have to make do with Tintanic. That's what we've got.
Trying to find something else I could show you. I've got these coins I got from Simon Medhurst. I think it's either coins from 1912 or replicas. I'm trying to get it out now. So here is a coin, what they would have had in 1912 times.
A penny, yeah. We have a pocket watch like that. It has a penny on the one side, and you turn it over on the other side, it has the face of young Queen Victoria.
I'll be right back. I'm just gonna go get my other Titanic stuff.
All right.
Okay, so I got this postcard thingy when I went to the Sea City Museum in Southampton. Southampton is where the Titanic departed to go for New York City.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I got that. I've got this photo. This would have been after the disaster.
Yeah.
That's the paper
This boy, I believe, was killed in the First World War.
I've got this book I got from the Sea City Museum. It's White Star Line Olympic and Titanic third class accommodations.
That's a lovely book.
And it's got like paintings of like the third class general room. And then here we've got during construction.
That's a lovely little book.
The shaft brackets. I believe that's a third class cabin.
The third class basin was basically the first miniature item I built for the Titanic as a mold. And I still have it. We probably have to cost about 2,000 of them for the Titanic.
Here's the third class.
We use that photograph as a reference.
Here's the third class smoking room. Painted.
It's nice that they thought about third class passengers as smokers.
We've got the launch of Olympics, just painted white.
Yes, that's a lovely photograph.
There were also photos of the Titanic launch on the websites and stuff like that. So here is the caption says "putting in the boilers." Then here we've got in Belfast Dry Dock, April the 1st, 1911.
As the hull is being painted.
That's the Olympic.
Have you noticed on the top part of the bow, they have those box-like structures? Do you know what those are?
What?
So just about in front of the number 1 smokestack, on the side of the bow. Yes, those little box structures. Do you know what those are?
Nope.
Those are lavatories. Those are lavatories for the workmen building the Olympic and the Titanic. So they would use those lavatories instead of lavatories that they would build into the ship. Because obviously the plumbing inside the Titanic and the Olympic wasn't finished at the time. So they couldn't have the workmen get on and off the ship all the time if they had to make a number 1 or a number 2.
Thank you for sharing that fact.
It's Bruce Beveridge you need to thank for that. He's fantastic with his research.
This is the rudder.
101-ton rudder, assembled in parts. It's amazing that that thing weighed so much, because you'd never say it by looking at it in photographs. You'd think that, like a little plastic model kit, you would be able to just maneuver it by hand. But those rudders weighing 101 tons, there was no way you were going to move it by hand. So, I mean, it's amazing how they managed to build it into hydraulics, into the engineering, to be able to turn that rudder by simply turning the wheel of the ship in the wheelhouse.
That must have took a lot of designing.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of thinking. Thomas Andrews was a genius.
Here we got the
as was his uncle Alexander Carlier.
So there's the anchor. I believe Titanic's anchor.
Yes, the Olympic anchor, center anchor.
Yeah, Titanic's anchor took about 20 horses to carry it.
And again, it's interesting to see that the anchors here in this photograph also painted white for publicity, so it would stand out better in photographs.
Here's the third class sleeping accommodation.
We had a fully erect cabin at the artifact exhibition. It looked identical. It was wonderful to see it.
That's all that's in that book.
It looked a lot bigger, though, on screen, I must say. I'm unfortunately not around my usual Titanic collection, so I can't show you any fancy books on my side. Oh yes, I think I saw you with a poster of this the other day in a video on Facebook.
When it went live.
It's a lovely book.
Yeah, there's the poster.
I also have an eyewitness book.
And then there's it's a very nice book because it gives you loads of facts about the ship.
Yes. I basically have the same book.
I've skipped a few pages there.
Yeah.
Bigger than that.
No, what's another nice one to collect is Ken Marshall's illustrated history and 882 and a half answers to your questions about Titanic. It's also a lovely children's book.
I've also got this cup here, a painting. I don't know who the painter was.
Yes, I think it's an unknown artist who did the painting, because I remember using it for research for masks for COVID-19. Needs to be in the public domain.
That was
That's a lovely cup.
That was from the Sea City Museum in Southampton.
Do you take a chance and add water to it?
Not yet. I ain't thought about that yet. I've just kept it in its bubble wrap to like keep it.
Because the last Titanic I added water to didn't do so well.
And then I've got this book here, quite a big one.
Oh, yes. I also have this book. It's a lovely book. I saw it at my friend Valda Vessel's Titanic collection. She has all these beautiful children's illustrated books in her collection, and they're beautiful. They're lovely. I went out and ordered it especially. I love this book. It's fabulous.
I also believe that you're in the Titanic book club.
Yes, I am. Joe Carlier is a good friend of mine. We've been friends for probably about 10 years. And we've always caught up and always had chats and long conversations. So glad I met her.
I recently joined the club on the 6th of August. That was when I attended the 3rd year anniversary Zoom meeting.
Oh, yes. I saw that meeting. I also listened to it intently. George Behe is also a friend of mine. And we've also been in contact with each other for a very, very long time, chatting about Tintanic. He was there before the Titanic was built even. So, he followed the entire construction. And I wanted to be part of the 3rd anniversary Zoom celebration that the book club was hosting, but unfortunately couldn't attend because it would have probably taken place in our country around 2 a.m. in the morning. So I just had to watch the replay. But I could have kicked myself because I had so much to say to George. He's such a legend for me.
For me, it started at 11 o'clock at night and finished at 2:30 in the morning.
Real passion is required to sit up for a Zoom at that hour. And for years, we've been pronouncing his surname wrong in South Africa. We've been going, it's George Behe, but it's Behe. He actually pronounced it for everyone in that particular Zoom. So that was interesting to learn as well.
Just checking if
So tell me, Riley, you're 13, right?
Yes.
And so how long have you been a Titanic enthusiast?
I've been a Titanic enthusiast for, I'd say, about a year now.
Okay, that's good. So you would probably qualify in 1912 as a workman. You could go and help build ships themselves because they used young boys of 12 or 13 years of age to also help build the ships, to be rivet boys, to throw the rivets down at the older men so that they could put them into the side of the hull.
I never knew that.
Yeah, it's what we call free child labor, so works for us adults,
By the looks of things, it looks like I have one last question, and it's about the Titanic. Okay, so where's the next destination for the Titanic? As you said, you were gonna go on tour with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so originally we wanted to tour to other countries as well, but I've become extremely exhausted with the touring just through our own country, and I find that I dislike other countries very much. The idea, the prospect of going to foreign countries and being alone and not being able to speak the language, it's a very daunting thing to go overseas with the physical model, and also very, very expensive. We probably estimate just moving the Titanic from here to Britain would probably cost us around 500,000 Rand. So it's another 500,000 that we don't have. So with the anniversary of the Titanic disaster this year in 2021, to mark the occasion for the Titanic arriving at her final destination, the Titanic was sponsored by Venolia, the original advertiser for the real Titanic in 1912. They supplied rose fragrance soaps to first-class passengers. And so with the advent of COVID-19 and the pandemic hitting the world, our plans for traveling overseas also automatically changed because it's very, very difficult to enter countries with a giant Titanic model and declare it, so there's a lot of red tape going around. So we have decided about a year ago, we scanned the Titanic in 3D through a company called RealScan 3D Reality Capture. And they have created an online exhibition for the Titanic as the Titanic was on display in Westwood Mall in December of 2020 and during the second wave of COVID, nonetheless. And we scanned the Titanic in a 3D virtual environment. So people can literally walk around the Titanic as if they were at the exhibition from the comfort of any handheld device or computer. Therefore, we're calling it Tintanic virtually unsinkable because it can sync with any compatible device anywhere in the world. So we are currently advertising the Titanic for December of 2021 as a physical virtual reality exhibition that will go to Belfast and to Britain and to the USA and to Australia. So it's incredible how everything works out in the end. So you don't stress about moving to other countries and all that eventually. You just learn to go with it. So we will go to Belfast. We just won't be going there physically. But the Titanic will be going there within the next couple of months, I'm pretty sure, as a virtual exhibition. So it's quite exciting. I'm so glad that Venolia came on board for the Titanic because for me, it was about the association with them. The Venolia soap brand being the vintage brand backing the Titanic, I think it was just a beautiful ending to a long history with the Titanic overshadowing them. But they did survive as one of the vintage brands from 1912, as they were the only ones who actually advertised when the Titanic went out on a maiden voyage. So all the other advertisers that were involved in the construction of the Titanic or had some involvement with product being featured on board the ship thought it would be a good idea to advertise after the Titanic returned from New York, which turned out to be a very bad thing because with the sinking of the Titanic, it made the Venolia brand just more famous than it already was. Something interesting on my side I can show you is this copy of the Illustrated London News. It is a newspaper that was found in a small town, coastal town in South Africa called Knysna. And on the front page of it, it has a giant iceberg. And the date for this illustrated newspaper was Saturday, April 20th, 1912. And one would pay 6p in 1912 for this very fat edition newspaper. And what I find absolutely interesting about it is, I'm sorry, I'm going to, it might just take me a couple of seconds to open it up because it's very fragile as it is an authentic newspaper from the time. It's not a reprint. This newspaper basically came out a week after the Titanic had gone to the bottom. And what I find endlessly fascinating about it is that, and without breaking the newspaper, I'll try and lift it up for you to the screen. What I find interesting about it is that there is a Venolia advert placed inside the newspaper showcasing their soaps in dainty tins. And it was a full half-page ad. So what I love about it is the fact that it basically proves that even in the face of a giant disaster like the Titanic, Venolia was still business-minded. It was business as usual. Life had to go on. Business had to continue. So they placed this advert even back then. And it's one of the reasons why I contacted Venolia in the first place, because I said to them that it would be a beautiful marriage with the Tintanic to advertise your brand for the next 100 years with a full color ad, which can be found on the Tintanic website as well. We have beautiful banners of them, and those banners are also what we sell here in South Africa to help promote the Titanic project so we can stay afloat.
Okay, thank you.
And we also sell all the range of the Venolia soaps, the rose fragrance, the velvet orchid, the lavender and sandalwood in soap bars. And people can find them in any of the retail outlets in South Africa, but they choose to buy them from the Titanic because they have a special connection to an exhibition that is very, very rare. So when people buy the soaps from us, we also give them a 1912 Venolia advertisement postcard, the very famous one, which was printed in all the newspapers at the time. So it's quite cute and it's quite nice, and it's a lovely fairy tale ending for Venolia with Titanic.
Okay, thank you for sharing. That's all the questions I've got. If you want to ask me any questions, you're more than welcome to. Or if you would like to present anything, share anything, you're more than welcome to.
Well, so how many books do you have in your Titanic collection, Riley?
In my Titanic collection, at the moment, I've got about 1, 2, 3, 4 books.
Well, if you collect for 20 years, you'll end up with 400 like me. I probably have about 300 Titanic books that I've collected throughout the years. And I've read them all. And among my favorites are A Night to Remember, Night Lives On, and most recently Titanic and Photographs. And I also love Ghosts of the Abyss, the James Cameron movie books, Titanic and Illustrated History, and Bruce Beveridge's fantastic Titanic Ship Magnificent, Volumes 1 and 2. It took me about 2 years to read them because they are like university textbooks and they explain everything to the rivet and to the detail. So you have to make sure that when you're reading these books, you're actually studying Titanic instead of just reading jargon like a fairy tale. There is in my collection something from the Old Titanic Society of South Africa that I find is very interesting. Jack Grimm, I think it was, who went out the year before Dr. Robert Ballard discovered the Titanic accidentally. And Grimm went out to look for the Titanic and didn't find it. And I must say, it's a very interesting read to realize how much effort they had put into all those expeditions to try to locate the Titanic. And even though you know that they're not going to find the wreck of the Titanic because Dr. Robert Ballard discovered it in 1985, it's an interesting read. I always say to people that when the Titanic was discovered in 85, it had been 73 years since she was last seen. And, nobody knew what had happened to her or what the true facts were. But because Robert Ballard found her and discovered her, The Discovery of the Titanic is also a fantastic book that I love reading. It also marries in with that concept. It's a fantastic idea about every time you read The Discovery of the Titanic, you almost go into a gasp. Like, is he going to find it? Is he going to find it? The excitement and the thrill of it is there. It's like you're discovering it all over again. And I find that in hindsight, if you look at the wreck of the Titanic, how it's decaying now, and as opposed to what it looked like 30 years ago when it was discovered. the wreck of the Titanic, that's the Titanic that we remember. That's the Titanic that we love. We, as Titanic enthusiasts in South Africa, are very emotional about it. We don't like to see the Titanic's roofs caving in and walls falling over and sagging into one another. It's things like the crow's nest on the forward mast, with the mast, buckling, and the crow's nest actually, falling off into one of the cargo hatches, we presume. Things like that. It's very hard to look at, and we're lucky enough to be around when the Titanic was discovered in '85 to see her in that beautiful state. And it's like Marshall said, it's like an autopsy now. So you look at it now, and it's very, very difficult to look at. So it's interesting, all the different books and things out there on the market about it. So yeah, I think we're very fortunate.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have for today.
Thank you so much, Riley. Appreciate it. You're welcome to call on any time. I was just a little disappointed with my lighting tonight. I think it was very, very dark when we started. I don't know why all of a sudden it's lighter. So okay,
you're welcome.
So if you want to shoot take 2, let's go for it.
Okay.
Anyway, all right, Riley, thank you. I must also be getting on. It was lovely talking to you, and thanks for calling.
You're welcome.
And thank you for showing me some pieces in your collection. It was really nice.
You're welcome.